Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. It certainly feels like it's been a long time since I said that, and I suppose it has been. Recently on my Gentleman Gamer Facebook page, I posted about my absence from YouTube and the reasons behind it. Partly it's been down to my being occupied with other projects, but also it's been due to my being somewhat burnt out on vlogging. I kind of reached a point where I'd said everything that I felt like I had to say. I wasn't really in the mood to do videos, to record. I've been playing quite a lot of games, I've been writing a fair amount as well, and, well, that's occupied my time more. But the response that I got to my post was surprising, shall we say. Now, I have to say thank you to all of those people that have decided to tick like on the Gentleman Gamer Facebook page. I believe there's over 800 of you. And the reason I say thank you is because I did not expect the sheer number of comments asking for videos on certain topics. I asked for inspiration, I asked for a muse to sort of drop out of the sky, and I got it. But then it occurred to me, how am I going to filter through this vast array of comments and, well, deal with each of these requests? And then it occurred to me, well, I'll just start from the top. Now, the first request from Micah Henry was to do a review of the Forgotten Realms campaign set. Now, I don't own the 4th edition Forgotten Realms campaign set because I don't play Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. That's not to say I didn't own it. I got rid of my 4th edition stuff shortly after I bought it. To be honest, it wasn't of a quality that I like in a role-playing game. I'm not a big fan of the game itself. But what I do have is the old grey box, Forgotten Realms campaign set for AD&D, the original. The original that was released in the 1980s, 1987, and this was actually one of my first role-playing game products. It was something I was directed to. I had bought the Forgotten Realms campaign setting for 3rd edition first because I got into gaming around the very start of 3rd edition, but I loved the setting so much of Forgotten Realms that I tracked down the original. I wanted to see the differences, and I'd been reading the Forgotten Realms novels for many years before I actually got into role-playing. I remember as a child actually reading the Moonshae trilogy, which in retrospect were fairly heavy going, but I always preferred that level of fantasy, that kind of Celtic-esque fantasy, to the Drizzt Do'Urden novels by R.A. Salvatore. So, you will, Micah, get a review of the Forgotten Realms campaign, but it's the Forgotten Realms campaign set for AD&D. Now, what do you get in the box? Well, after we open it up, we get a Encyclopedia of the Realms, or otherwise known as a Player's Guide to the Forgotten Realms. We get a DM's sourcebook, with, I believe that's Azun the 4th on horseback on the front cover. We get several maps in full colour that you can put together to make your Faerun, or just the areas of Faerun that you wish to illustrate in your game, because of course, why would a player's character know what's going on in Thay if they are operating on the Sword Coast? You get several hex grids that you can use to apply to the maps. There are rules in the Encyclopedia for animal travel, and how many hexes, the small hexes and the large hexes, they can... that's not going to show you much. How fast they can travel in the course of a day. So, there you go. And we have a little flyer for Dragon Magazine. Oh, the long lamented Dragon Magazine of old. Join the crusade. Subscribe to Dragon. It's not going to get you much now. And the Forgotten Realms newsletter. We could join the adventure if we really want to. But we don't. Because I feel like that would be return to sender, marked addressee, gone away. Now, the most important things about this to note are the maps obviously aren't in as high a quality as the maps that we get in 3rd and 4th edition, and no doubt in D&D Next. they don't have 3D effects. They do not look like they've been created by some decent map-making computer program, and the art that goes into them is very basic indeed. You have the generic, or almost Ordnance Survey colours of map-making, yellow for land, greens for forests, browns for mountains, and so on. So it's by no means a complex map system. It doesn't look like it's been intricately made. But there's a nice feeling of nostalgia to looking at it. If you want to get basic, if you want to just throw people into a fantasy setting and they can imagine where towers go, where the castles go, where the towns should go, what they should look like, rather than giving them a theme park style map where all the cities look bigger than they actually should and all the sort of spires stick out like a Game of Thrones opening sequence, you've instead got a map of the Sword Coast that looks like that. And it is the Sword Coast, that was a good guess. You know, it does the job. It does the job. I certainly can't oversell it as being a thing of beauty, but it is a thing of function. Now, moving on from the maps, we do of course have our books. Let's start with Encyclopedia, as that is our player's guide. The Encyclopedia of the Realms is a 98-page book, rather, and it has an introduction from Elminster. It has a breakdown of the calendar in the realms, the language of the realms, the currencies of the realms, various elements of common parlance that are in the realms that I recall were dropped in later editions. So, for instance, well met, the most often used greeting in Faerun. Until next, may your sword be ever wet and your bottom dry. The pirates of the inner sea often say that, for obvious reasons. Amarast, farewell until next we meet. The sailors of the south. Forges warm, friend. Gnomish farewell, and so on. Those kinds of things. The reason I love the cant in Planescape is because I feel it gives the planes such an interesting cultural vibe, especially Sigil. I always, when I run a Forgotten Realms game, throw in well met and Amarast and Allore. That's another version of well met from the Shining South, no, Inner Sea land. So yeah, there we go. It's been a while since I've played. Brayunk vos strolk. If you die while I'm gone, do it quickly. Hobgoblin with the unspoken addendum because I wouldn't want to miss the fun. So we, beyond that, have the religion of the realms, which in Forgotten Realms fashion is expansive. We have all the deities from Bane to Lothander to Lyra to Merkel to Lovatar to Ogma to Selûne to Shah to Talos and Tymora, and all those in between. We even have some of the demigods and the non-human gods listed. So I've heard before people saying, you know, Forgotten Realms got really watered down once they started throwing all the elven gods and dwarven gods and things like that, Corel and Larethian and Clangeddin and so on. Well, they were already in the Forgotten Realms, not to worry about that. The politics among the gods and their clergies is detailed in here. So, for instance, Torm, Tyr and Ilmater making a fairly standard triad. Meanwhile, Talos, Auril, Umberlee and Malar being the gods of destruction and so on, and how their faiths may well converge and work together. There is a table, because I know some of you love tables, breaking down the different faiths and which classes typically worship them. Bear in mind this is AD&D, and while the alignment was there, there wasn't the three-step alignment, and some of the restrictions didn't exist, some of the restrictions most definitely did. So, for instance, if you're a lawful evil fighter, your deity is typically going to be Tempus or Bane, despite the fact Tempus is a chaotic neutral deity. In 3rd and 4th edition, that's less, well, pressed, shall we say. And it goes on. Fighters, paladins, cavaliers, magic users, illusionists, assassins, thieves, rangers, barbarians, bards, druids, monks, and clerics, because, of course, those were the classes of AD&D. We have a detailed list of adventuring companies, ranging from the Four, so the Company of the Wolf, to Halfling Inc., which I think is just an Ed Greenwood joke. I may have to ask him about it on the Candlekeep forum, actually. And beyond the adventuring companies that you can inject into your game, you also have geography. And where Faerun has always been at its strongest, in my opinion, next to deities, is its elaborate and amazing geographical detail. Some people dislike the Forgotten Realms because they feel like the world has already been completed. And I can kind of see that point of view. It's almost what attracts me to Numenera. There's a feel of Age of Exploration to Numenera. Whereas Forgotten Realms has already been mapped. But there's lots of areas of expanse between these cities, and if you ever just want a setting to pick up and play, and know that there's enough detail to this city, or this jungle, or this mountain range, for you to run a one-off or even a campaign, then Forgotten Realms is certainly a good setting to go to in that regard. And this edition is no exception. We have a map of Arabelle, which I believe was the key town in Shadowdale, one of the Time of Troubles novels, which was released around this time, of course, which has 151 separate locations detailed in it across 2 pages. We have all of the cities from Baldur's Gate to Battledale to Candlekeep to Waterdeep and Cormyr and Sembia, so all the countries as well, Thay and Zentil Keep, the role of druids and dragons, and the ecology of various other races like halflings and dwarves and how they fit into it. It's interesting to note which locations disappear between editions and why that may be. I like to think that just naturally through the passage of ages, some towns get abandoned, some towns get destroyed, some get taken over in war. Sometimes that's detailed, sometimes it's left to the DM's imagination, sometimes because the Forgotten Realms is such a novel-heavy setting, those things are detailed in stories, in books, but in the novels rather, but don't actually translate as well into the campaign setting. The art in the Forgotten Realms campaign set is of AD&D fare, so here's a gnome. And despite what Ander might have to say, I like gnomes. So, a nice looking half-elf, who is of course dressed incredibly impractically, because it's AD&D. Gender rights didn't exist at this point, and definitely for worse. Halflings, strangely large-headed creatures, half-man. So yeah, we've got the Embassy, we've got loads of organisations detailed as well, from the Knights of the Shield to the Shadow Thieves to the Iron Throne, and so on. All of the classes, all of the races, all of the organisations, all of the religions, all of the cities, all of the mage sigils that you're most likely to see in the Forgotten Realms are detailed, and indeed it has detail on how you may well construct your own for your magic users. Merchant companies are detailed as well. You've got maps of Myth Draenor, you've got so much information. A map of Scornubel, I don't think that was ever recreated. And the Old Skull Inn. The Encyclopedia of the Realms is quite expansive for a 98-page tome, and it almost makes you wonder why newer editions have to spend so much word count on stat blocks and mechanics when you can find so much of a rich trove of information compressed into a book like this. It reminds me of how much I love Faiths and Avatars, the 2nd edition Deity book for the Forgotten Realms, because there's just so much information packed into such a small book because the font is so small. But every time I go in there I find something I want to run in a game. You have timelines and you have family trees in the Encyclopedia of the Realms as well. You have an appendix, and that's it. But that is the world of the Forgotten Realms in a nice 98-page book, and if you decided you wanted to write, on the back of the book you have a table for the name of your adventuring company, its symbol, and who comprises it. Character number, player name, character name, class and level, race and sex, alignment, special abilities, combat adjustments, armor class and type, hit points. How easy it would be to make a character sheet that would just go... well, no longer the case, is it? No longer. So, we then have the DM's sourcebook to the Realms. And the DM's sourcebook contains more secretive information, of course, because it's a DM's sourcebook. What does it contain? Well, in fact, it contains all that travel information I was mentioning earlier that I think was in the player's guide, so I was lying. It also contains information regarding the rough terrain in the Forgotten Realms, how to navigate it, what kinds of encounters you would come across. There are detailed NPCs Very few of them are of a particularly high level, because this is before the sort of Power Bloat editions that came out later. So, interesting NPCs you may meet. Arthagus of the Miracles, an illusionist, a 7th level illusionist in Sembia. That's fairly powerful. Asbrashlumin, a 6th level magic user of the Dragon Cult, a cult of the dragon. And just to prove the alignment point I made earlier, he's a neutral evil follower of Mystra, which of course you wouldn't get these days. You have most of the NPC so we've got a 3rd level fighter, 2nd level thief, we've got a 7th level thief, and 11th level magic user. Most of these characters are characters you could throw into a game as an NPC, and if the player characters decided they wanted to fight them, they'd have a fighting chance. Again, a criticism that's often levelled at the Forgotten Realms is all its NPCs are stupidly overpowered. I know that's through no fault of Ed Greenwood or a lot of the creators, because these characters are important and well loved from the novels by a lot of people, and so they want to see them with that much information on, but at the same time it does sometimes corrupt the setting a little. We have some excellent art of Lord Fazul Chembril and a beholder behind him. I think he's aware that the beholder's behind him, because the beholders are often in league with the Zentarim, which Fazul commands, alongside Manchun. So we also have mercenary companies in here too. We have 2 years worth of rumours, tales and news, encompassing the Year of the Worm and the Year of the Shield, the Year of the Prince, 1356 and 1357, Dale reckoning. Essentially each month from Chess to Tarsak and beyond has about 6 or 7 rumours and tales that are all across the Forgotten Realms. Again, reminiscent for me of recently reading and running Numenera, because that book is absolutely full of plot hooks. So is this. We have 2 adventures that are dungeon crawls based in Myth Dranor, a favourite adventuring area in the realms, because they're so close to the Dale Lands, which is a nice sort of home base for the more rural, jolly old England setting that some people prefer. And beyond that, we have, as part of those adventures, a great spell book that you can find that is full of spells that have not been recreated in any other D&D setting, a lot of them, although there is Agonaz's Scorcher, which it has, I think, appeared in pretty much every edition now for Dungeons & Dragons. And beyond that, well, that's it. We have an index and we have a random monster chart. So, that is the Forgotten Realms campaign set. Now, I am sure you can get it in PDF, but I would implore you to track down the old copy. Nothing better than actually having a boxed set containing all your books. And I know this has been a long video, but hell, you know, when I come back in force. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope that was an interesting review. It was more of an outline, if anything, or evaluation of the Forgotten Realms campaign set. So, to review, in conclusion, I do love the Forgotten Realms. If I ever want a go-to fantasy setting, I will use the Forgotten Realms. And the reason for that is because in a lot of senses it's high fantasy, it's generic, it's what people expect. There are dungeons, there are dragons, there are wizards, and they are powerful. And so I like the Forgotten Realms. I do love the geography, I love the religions, I love the politics behind it as well. I do not expose my players to all the power-bloated NPCs and gods that are running around smashing each other, and I don't think you have to either. I think it's a misrepresentation of the setting to say that it has to be that way, and DMs that constantly bring the hammer of Elminster down, or staff, or Elminster down on their players because they're not doing something that the DM wants, well, it's the DM that's doing it wrong. It's not the players, it's not the setting, it's the DM's interpretation of it. Just because powerful characters are introduced does not mean you have to use them. And the basic set is a perfect example of that. It is full of minor characters through to sort of moderate range, and a setting that's rich, falling off the page and waiting to be eaten up by your game and your players. I always recommend the Forgotten Realms to someone who's first getting into fantasy, because it's very difficult to go wrong with it, in my mind. And a lot of people have been exposed to it through the video games, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Neverwinter Nights. So I strongly recommend. If you are on the lookout for a fantasy setting that a lot of people will have heard of, but not everyone would have played, if you're looking for something that contains a chockload of spells and interesting characters, then you could do a hell of a lot worse, as I often say, than go to the Forgotten Realms campaign set. My preference would be 1st edition, 3rd edition, 2nd edition, and then 4th edition, if you had to choose. 3rd edition is probably my favourite in terms of size, but yeah, 1st is pretty damn good, and it's got the nostalgia factor, which is never bad. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you everyone for commenting. What will the next video be? Well, it'll be whatever the next person posted.